Good afternoon, everybody. We're so excited for everyone who is here in person at Mailman and everyone that is joining us online. We are so thankful for your attendance today. There's so many people here and online that have contributed to the Mailman Center in so many different ways, whether it's a family member, whether it is an individual with a disability, donors, funding organizations, our local, state, federal, and international partners that we have, and of course, all of our staff and faculty and our trainee alumni that we also have here, myself included with that. My name is Jason Gent. I am the Assistant Director of the Mailman Center, and I am actually a product of the Mailman Center training program here. I was a psychology resident many, many moons ago, and really that was really foundational to influence what my career has become over the past 18 years, was that year. There's many organizations that exist that have mission statements and they have vision statements, but for many of them, it's just words. Here at Mailman, I really feel like the vision of the Mailman Center is lived out daily. And really that is about improving lives through innovation, connection, and impact. You will hear those words a lot today, but you will also hear a lot about the action behind those words. We have a lot of compelling stories for you today about the past of the Mailman Center, what we're doing now, and what we hope to accomplish in the future. And you're going to hear from lots of people today who are truly passionate about the work that they get to do at Mailman each and every day. And I think you'll see from the people that you hear from today, whether it's video or them speaking, that they truly have a servant's heart in everything that they do for improving the lives for people with disabilities. The videos that you will experience today very much will demonstrate the impact that the Mailman Center has had at a local, family, and federal level. We hope that today, that you experience today is a love letter. It's meant to be a love letter who came before us and blazed the way for what we get to do today. It's a love letter for those of you who sacrifice time with your families to make the lives of others better. And it's a love letter for those who we hope to partner with in the future for where we're headed next. We have a lot of things planned for you this afternoon. We'll start off with Dr. Armstrong with a little bit about the history. We have a special video as well at the beginning. And then we're really going to walk through kind of the past, present, and kind of where we're headed in 4 different domains that we feel like we really excel at. And those are in the areas of clinical services, research, training, and community engagement. And then finally, you'll be able to learn a lot about where Mailman is headed next. We'll have some brief transitions between the storytelling that's happening, and about halfway through, we'll have a longer intermission for you. Just so you know, so for those of you who are in person, there are Art Abilities collections on the sides, and for those of you who have joined us online, there are Art Ability collection pieces that are up for bid. That bid will be open to 4:30, but we'll go over that a little bit more a little bit later. Also, there are refreshments and snacks for those who are in person in the back of the auditorium. The only way to access that is to this side of the auditorium. And then if you need to use the restroom, the men's room is to your right and the women's to your left at the front of the auditorium. After showcasing kind of our past, present, and where we're headed next, you are invited to attend a reception in the lobby. If you're attending virtually and you want to come on over at 5 o'clock, we'd love to have you as well. So with that said, let's go ahead and get this event started. First, I would like to introduce our Chair of Pediatrics, who is the Senior Associate Dean of Child Health. He's the Professor of Pediatrics and Public Health Sciences. He's the George E. Batchelor Endowed Chair in Child Health, and he is the Physician-in-Chief at Holtz Children's Hospital at Jackson Health System. Dr. Glenn Flores has truly been a champion and an advocate for the Mailman Center since its arrival to the Department of Pediatrics. We were so excited with him coming to the Department of Pediatrics with his focus on health equity, which is something that the Mailman Center very much strives for. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Flores.
Well, thank you for that very kind introduction, Dr. Gent, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm really thrilled to welcome you all to the celebration of over 50 years of leadership in training, service, research, and community engagement that has occurred at the Mailman Center for Child Development since its opening way back in March 1971. Improving lives through innovation, impact, and connection. This is a powerful vision, aspirational yet pragmatic. Over the next few hours, you will, I believe, be amazed by the innovation that has occurred and is still occurring, by the impact of the Mailman Center programs reaching far beyond the walls of the center, and by the enduring successes in improving lives that have been realized by the vast partnerships that the Mailman Center has established in our very own community, across the state and nation, and even across the world. The spirit and commitment of the Mailman Center are embodied by the brilliant observation made by President John F. Kennedy, who said, "Children are the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for the future." Please join us as the leadership, faculty, trainees, alumni, community partners, and children and families who have benefited from the Mailman Center tell an incredible and inspiring story. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. Next up, we have Dr. Daniel Armstrong, who has been on faculty at the U since 1985. I won't say what grade I was in that. But he was named the Mailman Center Director in 1999, so he's been at this for almost 25 years. Dr. Armstrong has been the definition of the Mailman vision statement of improving lives through innovation, connection, and impact. Much of what you will learn today is in one way or another connected back to Danny's leadership and vision. Danny is an eternal optimist that some of us need some of the time, who has committed his life to serving others in a way that is truly admirable and inspiring to all of us who know him. He has broken down so many systemic barriers at the local, state, and federal levels to improve care for children and people with disabilities and special health care concerns. Beyond his stellar leadership and stewardship of the Mailman Center, Dr. Armstrong has an impressive history of being a key leader within the Department of Pediatrics, holds Children's Hospital, Faculty Affairs, Child Health for the Miller School of Medicine. Dr. Armstrong has been been actively involved in leadership of many organizations at the national, state, and local level related to children with disabilities and children with special health care concerns. Danny exemplifies leading with a servant's heart, as I was talking about a little bit earlier, and I'm so excited for you to hear from today. So will you join me in welcoming Dr. Armstrong?
Thank you, Jason. I told him to keep it short. We'll talk about that later. Thank you so much. We're going to start our program today with a message from someone who has been associated with our Mailman Center and a good friend of mine for more than 35 years, Mayor Danielle Levine Cava. So if we can see the video from Dean Cava right now.
Hello, Mailman Center. I'm your Miami-Dade County Mayor, Daniela Levine Cava, and I'm honored to virtually congratulate the Mailman Center for Child Development as we celebrate this remarkable milestone, the center's 50th anniversary. I send my heartfelt congratulations to everyone at the Mailman Center. For half a century, this institution has been a beacon of hope and support for children and families across our community. Your dedication to early childhood development, research, and advocacy has made an indelible mark on the lives of countless children and their families across our county. Your commitment to improving the lives of people with disabilities and their families through innovation, connection, and impact makes our entire community stronger. Through your tireless efforts, you've empowered children to reach their full potential, breaking down barriers and fostering inclusivity every step of the way. As we celebrate 50 years of accomplishments, and I've been part of it for at least 40, let us also take a look to the future with renewed optimism. There is still work to be done, and I have every confidence that the Mailman Center will continue to lead the way in shaping a brighter, more inclusive future for all our children. Once again, congratulations and thank you for your unwavering commitment to our community. I look forward to seeing the Mailman Center for Child Development continue to flourish and make a difference for generations to come.
She regretted not being able to be here in person. Her schedule got a little crammed. Being mayor of Miami-Dade County does that to you, but Daniela has been a close friend for a very long time, and we're so appreciative she was there. In her stead, the Deputy Director of the Office of Mayor, Ms. Tiffany Krapp, is here today to share with us something from the county.
Whereas it is fitting and proper that official acknowledgement be given to the Mailman Center for Child Development on the momentous occasion of the 50th anniversary, now therefore be it resolved that I, Daniela Levine Cava, Mayor of Miami-Dade County, Chairman Oliver G. Gilbert III, and the members of the Board of County Commissioners, on behalf of Miami-Dade County and this community, do hereby proclaim Friday, September 29th, 2023, as Mailman Center for Child Development 50th Year Celebration Day. In observance thereof, I call upon the good people of Miami-Dade County to join me in honoring the lasting contributions made to our way of life by the Mailman Center for Child Development for the past 50 years.
That's just wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Krapp, for being here with us and for carrying the load for the mayor. The Mailman Center for Child Development actually started its work in 1958. The Developmental Evaluation Clinic was opened then. It was funded by the Children's Bureau of the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and administered by the Dade County Department of Health. Our clinical director at that time was a dear friend for many of us, Dr. Lee Worley. That moved on until 1964, when the University of Miami was awarded a Department of Health, Education, and Welfare multidisciplinary training program grant in mental retardation, the word that was used then, and we've gotten rid of that word, thank goodness. As we moved on further, that grant evolved into a large U.S. Department of Public Health Service construction award that was given to university-affiliated facilities. University of Miami was one of the first 11, and that $3.054 million grant was then added to by the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation, and most importantly, by the incredible support and philanthropy of Abraham and Joseph Mailman, who gave an initial $1.081 million and then an additional $500,000 at the time of the opening of the center, and then some additional funds after that. So this was the start to build the building. Where this came from was a very interesting story. It started with a tennis match in Hyannisport, Massachusetts on the Cape. And the two people were playing were Eunice Kennedy Shriver and Dr. Robert Cook, who was the chair of the Department of Pediatrics at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and also the father of two children with developmental disabilities. I've had the chance and the pleasure in my life to actually talk with both Mrs. Shriver and Dr. Cook. The story is Dr. Cook says he was beating Mrs. Shriver. Nobody should beat Mrs. Shriver. He had to get out of it. Mrs. Shriver said she was beating Dr. Cook, and you don't embarrass the chair at Johns Hopkins. At any rate, they came to the net, and they decided not to play anymore because Dr. Cook said, you know, Mrs. Shriver, she had been pushing and had really gotten the President Kennedy and the Congress to create the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. And she really, because of their sister Rosemary, wanted to push moving people with disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities, out of institutions and into home and community settings. And Dr. Cook said, you know, if we're going to do that, we need a workforce because everybody who provides services now supplies them in institutions. And so Mrs. Shriver said, there's a pad and paper up on the second floor, go write it down. And so Dr. Cook wrote the idea to create university-affiliated facilities that would be funded by these construction grants and would then develop the ability to train the workforce for this new model.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anthony Kennedy Shriver, and I'm the founder, CEO, and chairman of Best Buddies International. But more important than anything I'm doing at Best Buddies or any of my titles, my proudest title is I'm the son of Eunice Kennedy Shriver, the founder of Special Olympics, and the force behind creating these university-affiliated programs. And I think the force behind Special Olympics and the force behind the Mailman Center and the force behind so many other great movements that have developed and evolved around the world to support the life and the research and the families of people with special needs. So I miss my mother dearly. It's been 14 years since she's passed away. She loved Miami. She loved the Mailman Center. I remember having gone there many times with her. I'm so proud that two of my daughters, Eunice Kennedy Shriver II and my daughter Francesca Shriver, both volunteered at the Debbie School and got a taste and a feel of all the wonderful work that has gone on at the Mailman Center for 50 plus years. It's an amazing accomplishment, and so many other university affiliated programs around the United States. I remember all the stories my mother used to tell about her and Dr. Cook coming up with plans on how to develop these university affiliated programs, how it was so critically important to create programming that could support families and children and adults with special needs in the community. And the Mailman Center has been, a pillar of success and a foundation for our community here in South Florida, which I've been a proud member of for 30 plus years now. It's hard to imagine that I've been here that long, but I have. So I'm proud of that. I'm really proud of, all the work that, my mom has done and all the people who have worked at the Mailman Center over the decades have done to change the lives of people with special needs. I'm proud of the 14,000+ people, I think it is, that the Mailman Center serves on an annual basis. I'm proud to have been around the table when my mom concocted these ideas, came up with Special Olympics, came up with the university affiliated programs. I'm proud of the incredible partnership that she and Dr. Cook had in developing these programs. I'm proud of Dr. Armstrong for his incredible leadership over the decades and ensuring that the Mailman Center continue to be robust, innovative, creative, and a proud partner in this community with so many different people. I'm super sad that I'm up here in Boston, Massachusetts, while all of you are down there in Miami celebrating this great accomplishment. I wish so much that I was there. I can't wait to hear about all the amazing work that's going to happen over the next 50 years. My mother always remember telling me nonstop, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? Keep it moving was her big line constantly. Keep it moving, keep it moving. So I know you're going to keep it moving at the Mailman Center. I know the next 50 years is going to be amazing. I hope I'll be able to play a small role in some capacity. I hope my children, who all live here in South Florida, will be able to play a small role, inspiring young people to continue to get involved in this movement. My mom was such a huge believer that all these great things happen at the local level. That's one of the reasons why I know in the early days, Mr. Sanford wanted to name the Mailman Center, the Eunice Kennedy Shriver Center. I have to be honest with you, I wish it was named the Eunice Kennedy Shriver Center. But it turned out to be the Mailman Center because she really wanted local people to buy in, local people to invest in serving people with special needs, and why I think everybody went to the Mailmans and they made their gift to help establish this, the great center that it is today. So she was a big one on local activation, the force and the power and the energy of local volunteers to make things a reality, and not to make these things national organizations run from the top down, but really run from the bottom up. And I think the Mailman Center has been led by this great community here in South Florida for so long, and continues to be led by this community here in South Florida. So I just wish everybody the best of luck today. I'm really bummed out that I'm not there in person. But I look forward to coming by in the near future, and look forward to continuing to stay involved, and hope you have an amazing celebration.
Now, I have to say, it's a little intimidating sometimes to interview the nephew of President John Kennedy. It's even more intimidating to interview the son of Eunice Kennedy Shriver. And so I thought that Anthony, though, did a really great job sharing with us the little connection of Mrs. Shriver's perspective with Dr. Cook some almost 60 years ago to come up with the idea to create this center, and what has really helped to drive us to where we are today. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about that connection, because was it not for Abraham and Joseph Mailman, we wouldn't be here today. The two Mailman brothers were bankers here in Miami. Mr. Abraham Mailman had a granddaughter with cerebral palsy. You might recognize the name Debbie, as in the Debbie School. And the two brothers came to the table and really made the connection with this center and with this university, with this community. And that came along with a gift from the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation. That was our connection to Mrs. Shriver. But importantly was the vision that these two individuals had for us from before we even got the first shovel in the ground. On the 22nd of March in 1971, the day after we opened, the Miami News at the time had a quote from Mr. Abraham Mailman. And he said, what about the 6 million children in America who already need centers just like this? Already in this center, children who have grown up hanging their heads are learning now to look up. And that was the perspective. How do we look up? How do we move to independence? How do we bring disability out of the institution and into the world? And so we were so grateful for the major contributions of the Mailman brothers and the connections that we've had with their family. It went on. I've had the chance to meet with Jody Wolf, the daughter of Joseph Mailman, several times, and Mickey Siegel, the daughter of Abraham Mailman, was a dear friend, and her daughter and her granddaughters. Actually, one of her granddaughters actually was a research assistant here at the Mailman Center. So the connections go back generations through the families. We continue to go on with the another grant. The Project 903 grant replaced the multidisciplinary grant. This was a large grant of over $1 million to create the Child Development Training Center that would go into this new university-affiliated facility. And then finally, in 1968, construction on the Mailman Center began. And you see this little picture. That's right over here at the corner. It doesn't look like the same. There was no Metro Rail and nothing else. It was just an empty lot at the time. And we began to move forward with construction until finally it was completed. And in March, on March 21st of 1971, was the Mailman Center grand opening. Now, Dr. Howell, who will be speaking in a minute, was very clear with me early on about what a great constructed building this was. It won architectural awards for the best academic center in the United States, or one of the best at the time of its opening. And a few years ago, it was put on as one of the top 100 buildings, academic buildings constructed in the United States in the 20th century. So really incredible background and basis there. And here you can see a Miami News article about it. The grand opening was incredible. The first I'd like to talk about is this picture of this lady over on the right side. That's Mrs. Lane Coleman. Mrs. Coleman was the executive secretary for President Henry King Stanford, the president of the University of Miami. She also had a son, Michael, who had a developmental disability resulting from birth trauma. And you'll hear more about Michael a little bit later in the program. But Mrs. Coleman recognized something. If you happen to notice the flight paths for the airplanes going into MIA come right over this building. And in 1971, it was Eastern Airlines was the dominant airline in the area, and those planes were loud. Mrs. Coleman called the CEO of Eastern Airlines and the director of the Miami International Airport and said, the Kennedys are coming to town. Jean Piaget is coming to town. Can you do something about the noise? And for the next 4 hours, air traffic was diverted around the Mailman Center. Incredible story. The other pieces that you hear, of course, there was a great story in the Miami News that day about the center. Dr. Robert Cook received an honorary doctorate from President Henry King Stanford at the grand opening. Of course, the presence of Abraham and Joseph Mailman was there. And then our keynote address was by one of the preeminent theorists in child development of all time, Professor Jean Piaget from Switzerland, as you see sitting here with Mrs. Shriver. And on the right is the who's who of the best people in developmental work for children in the world who were part of this program. So we had this incredibly auspicious start that is really unmatched. I do want to give a lot of credit to the people who have made the place really run and provided the vision. The first was Sam Giamona. Sam was a faculty member here, and while he was never the director of the Mailman Center, he was the director of that Child Development Center and was responsible for those grants that got everything constructed. Fred Richardson was hired in 1971 and was really the first director of the Mailman Center for a couple of years. He had come from Johns Hopkins. In the interim there, Dr. Bill Cleveland, one of the dearest friends that I know, stepped in and created something that was really unique for these kinds of centers. Dr. Cleveland served as the interim, and then when he recruited Dr. Stemfel, he made the decision that the chair of pediatrics would be the associate director of Mailman, and the director of Mailman would be associate chair of pediatrics, a really unique kind of thing that has carried through and created a relationship between all of child health and developmental services that I think is really unique in the country. Dr. Stemfel really led this place for many years. He was the director when I first came. And importantly, while he did that, not only here at the center, he was one of the architects of what we know as children's medical services. One of the model programs for dealing with children with complex healthcare needs, a model that stood for Florida for many, many years and was copied by states all over the country. Dr. Terry Urbano was our director of training for the center, and when Dr. Stemfel retired in 1994, Terry took over as the interim director. And then this gentleman, these two gentlemen here on the front, you can't see, Dr. Rodney Howell and Dr. Ed Onorati. I sent a note to Dr. Howell that I was over in the ambulatory care center, and I said, "This may sound like a harebrained idea, but what would you think?" And he said, "I think good." And so he had Mr. Onorati lead a search committee, and a month later, I got the job of a lifetime. And so I'm really indebted to these two gentlemen in ways you can never understand. But you know, the center doesn't run with the director. We really are good bobbleheads. And this center really took off because of the leadership and the administration by Mr. Ed Onorati. And Ed's sitting down here, and I would have you stand up, but later we'll have you stand up and be recognized, Ed, because Ed was the real force behind making things work. With him was this lovely young lady, Kathy Ruista Quevedo. She was Dr. Stemfel's executive secretary. I always said Kathy hired me. She was the one who really did all the stuff in between. We were able to bring on Patrice Fike as the administrator for the Mailman Center after Mr. Onorati retired. Jonathan Corbett also filled that role for us, and Ottawa Casado. And then along the way, the person who actually really made me bobblehead more than anything else, Carmel Bronzetti, and Carmel's right over here on the edge. And served in that role for over 20 years. So we're really great. And now Asia Levine has taken on that role. And Asia, I don't know where you are, but I want to recognize you. She's the person who's been spearheading and running most of today's production. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rodney Howell, the professor and chair emeritus of the Department of Pediatrics, and a dear, dear friend, and really the person who has mentored me more than anyone else. So Rod, please come on up and share your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Danny. I'm going to make just a few comments about some of my personal interactions with the Mailman Center over time, and about some of my personal history and how that kind of ties in with a lot of the activity that you've heard about today. I might point out, Danny just mentioned the fact that Bob Stemfel was the director of the Mailman Center for a long time, and I might point out he assumed the job September 1973, exactly 50 years ago today, which is kind of intriguing. Let me comment about a few personal issues that are very interesting and tie in with some of the stuff. At the same time we're talking about the Mailman Center coming online and being established, I was at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, and I was recruited away from the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda to begin my academic career at Johns Hopkins. I was recruited to that position by Dr. Robert E. Cook. And Bob Cook, of course, not only recruited me, was my boss and my mentor for many years, and Bob was a dear friend and so forth. At that time, however, the time that I was moving into the Kennedy at Hopkins, Johns Hopkins Hospital was also developing its own university-affiliated center, which is the John F. Kennedy Center, which is now the Kennedy Krieger, since the Krieger came to the table with a little money in recent years and so forth. And I was working very closely with that group because as a biochemical geneticist, I was working with the laboratory and so forth. And to make matters more complex and more interesting to me with all the events you've heard about today, at Johns Hopkins, I was appointed Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Senior Research Scholar in Mental Retardation. And my entire salary, the entire time I was at Hopkins, was funded by the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation. And so that gave me a great opportunity to work with the Kennedy Foundation, and all the Kennedy family, of course, lived very close to Hopkins. So we had a chance to see them and to know them and work with them. And so it was very intriguing, is at the same time, not knowing that I would be in Miami many years later, I was dealing with all the same team in Baltimore that was working simultaneously in Miami and so forth. And I might point out, let me make a further comment about one of the persons that came to the lab routinely and used to come visiting regularly was Eunice Kennedy Shriver. She came with other members of the Kennedy family, and she always dwarfed them in two areas, intelligence and interest. And so I might point out is that it is also very appropriate. This is not the Eunice Kennedy Institute, but the National Institutes of Health, of course, has been renamed, and so it is now the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institutes of Child Health and Human Development. Some years after the opening of the Mailman Center, I arrived in Miami in 1989 to replace Bill Cleveland. The Mailman Center at that time was only 16 years old. It was a very young institution and so forth. And as I looked around the Mailman Center, I was very, very interested not only in what was happening there, but as a biochemical geneticist, I was particularly interested in some of the people working in the Mailman Center. And one of the people that some of you may not know that was here at that time was Herb Lubbs. And Herb Lubbs was extremely well known internationally because Herb Lubbs described the Fragile X syndrome, which is a very important cause of developmental delay, and that work was described by Herb, and so that has a great history here in the institution. And of course, all during this time, I was working with Bob Stemfel and with Mr. Ed Honorati. I have photographs of both of them. I'm going to show you later at a younger age, et cetera. You'll be there. I was very interested in a couple of things that were going on when I moved here. But one of the things that I had discussed extensively with the dean was the fact that I thought it would be far more appropriate to move the administrative offices from the Department of Pediatrics in Jackson Memorial Hospital to the Mailman Center. And the place to do that movement was in the 9th floor of the Mailman Center. And I'd addressed the practical issue with Dean Fogel at that time, and also had as a written part of my recruitment package a mechanism to get to the 9th floor. For those of you who've been around the Mailman Center for a long time, there were only 2 elevators in the Mailman Center, neither of which went to the 9th floor. So I must be one of the few people that ever had a recruitment package that called for an elevator to be built to the 9th floor. But the 9th floor elevator was built as a part of that, et cetera. Also, soon after I arrived at this time, I had a cordial note from Mr. Joseph Mailman, the younger Mailman brother who lived in New York City. Abe Mailman, the older brother, had died in 1980, and that was Debbie's grandfather, as you know. Mr. Joseph Mailman congratulated me on the position and said he would really love to come to Miami for a visit, but he had been very ill, and he had been very ill, and his family would not let him travel. And so I wished him well and so forth. We had a very nice conversation. But I soon got a call from Jody Wolf, who was a good friend, and she was Mr. Joseph Mailman's daughter. And Jody Wolf lived here in Miami. And Jody called and she said, you know, Mom's gone to Paris shopping, and Dad's on the way down on an airplane, and he's coming to see you. So anyway, Mr. Joseph Mailman came to see me. The photographs apparently have been moving along. I was going to show them later. But anyway, we had a great visit with Mr. Mailman. And with Mr. Joseph Mailman, and importantly, when he got back to New York, he sent a check for $100,000 for the work of the Mailman Center and so forth, et cetera. So anyway, it's great for me to see so many people here today who made such a big difference in the Mailman Center. And we've already talked a lot about Ed Onorati, who's been here, but Ed also assumed additional responsibilities of being the vice chairman of the entire Department of Pediatrics for Administrative Affairs, and served in that role for a very, very long time. However, I think it's fair to say that the most important thing I did for the Mailman Center was to appoint Danny Armstrong as director of the Mailman Center. And I have a little more to say about that. His success and leadership is clearly establishes that appointment as a very good one. When I appointed Danny, all previous directors of the Mailman Center, and although the Mailman Center was fairly young, there had been a number of directors in and out. It was a short-term outfit. All those directors had all been MDs, and Danny, of course, is a PhD scientist, and I got a lot of consultations about that particular issue, which I took very carefully to heart and listened very carefully to, and promptly appointed Danny, and I think that's been one of the greatest things and so forth. But let me show you just a few photos of some of the folks that I've talked about briefly so that we can get along with the program. And I'm going to go back now since this is a photograph of actually the group that was working here helping to get the Mailman Center all started. And let me point out, I think Ted Kennedy is very visible to everybody, and on the far left of this photograph is Bill Nyan, who was chairman of pediatrics at that time, and on the far right was Sam Giamoni on the far right there, and so forth, and they left together to go to California. Behind Ted Kennedy, of course, is Eunice Kennedy Shriver, and then some other leaders of the Mailman Center in that photograph, and so forth, et cetera. There we go. And this is Joe Mailman during his wonderful visit here. Bernie Fogel, the dean for the medical school, and Bernie Fogel is a wonderful dean and very supportive of the Mailman Center. Joe Mailman right there on the right, and there's obviously me, and then Jody Wolf on the far photograph there. Then I have some, and then could we go to the next slide? My thing is perfect. That's Bob Stemple sitting in his office. And then finally, in the last photograph, is Ed Onorati, a bit younger than today. But anyway, I think that the Mailman Center has made incredible contributions, and it certainly has been my privilege to be a part of it and to see what good things are happening, and also to provide transportation to the 9th floor. Thank you very much.
Oh, the elevator to the 9th floor. The Mailman Center started with training, and where we are today is under this umbrella. We use this as a nice way to put it all together. You've heard, and you will hear all day today, the terms innovation, impact, and connection. And across the umbrella, you see the 4 core functions. These are required by the Developmental Disability Acts of 2000. This is what a university-affiliated facility, program, and now University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities is supposed to do. We don't create silos here of our grants. We create synergy. And so when we look at training, we have our large leadership and education in neurodevelopmental disabilities from HRSA and the Maternal and Child Health Bureau, that we also include disciplinary training programs that are accredited. We have a leadership pipeline program and tremendous outreach in the areas of community education and community training. And you'll be learning in the next few minutes about a lot of the things that happen in that area. In the service area, we started off really looking at clinical programs for children with mostly genetically based neurodevelopmental disabilities, and that expanded into broad clinical programs with contracts with the state. In fact, the 903 training grant that started everything, the feds, they reorganize the departments every time there's a new administration. And so the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare went away. Things got split up into different groups. And all of a sudden, the large grant sort of disappeared, and half of it went to Maternal and Child Health Bureau for the LEN grant. But we didn't know, and we had a little bit for our University Center on Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, but we didn't know what we were going to do for the rest of the money we lost. And that's when the state legislature in Florida stepped in and said, we'll match the rest. And we developed a contract with Children's Medical Services of Florida that has lasted from 1978 until today and is ongoing every year. We've seen programs that have been big fundamental programs, like our Debbie School, our Early Steps program, the Child Protection, and our evolving relationship with the Linda Ray Center, as well as big demonstration projects that have been funded by local groups like the Children's Trust. In the research area, we've had federally funded, foundation funded, industry funded kinds of research, and we've also had trainee projects that have had big impact. And you're going to hear a lot today about the incredible work that has happened in community engagement. March 1971, we opened. And as a point of personal privilege, that was also a pretty important time for me. Some of you heard that my mother passed away on Sunday, and I was thinking about her because in 1971, she took care of 2 children in our home. One was a typically developing little girl, and the other was a child with pretty severe cerebral palsy. My brother and sister and I grew up with a child with a severe disability in our home every day, with my mom taking care of her. My mother also had a friend, her best friend, who had a child with a very severe developmental disability, and one of the characteristic points of it was very loud vocalizations. Well, this was in a small community, and the church makes a big deal, but to have a child with loud vocalizations in your church, it's really disruptive to what the preacher's trying to say. And so my mom led a group of folks at the church, and they took a section in the back of the church, put in a glass area with soundproofing, put in speakers, and that family, for the remainder of their lives, with their daughter, who I just visited last week in North Carolina in a rehabilitation center, they were able to attend that church fully inclusive. And so when I think about 1971 as the opening of the Mailman Center, but also the time that my mother started to teach me things about inclusion before we ever had the word, about accessibility before we had the word, and she was special but not unique, because all across the country, mothers of children with developmental disabilities and their friends began to bring about what we hope to accomplish with the Mailman Center, which was to carry out this role of inclusion, of accessibility, of equity as we work today. And so that's where we really go with so much of what we do. You're going to hear today about 4 silos of community engagement, clinical services, training, and research, but don't be fooled by that. Because one of the things we've been very good at over the years is to make sure that we're at least a 2-for-1 and sometimes a 3-for-1 benefit for every dollar we spend. Because our training programs support the research that we do, and they provide the training, and often they're engaged with the community. And so you're going to see this overlapping. So if you're listening to hear about a clinical program and it doesn't come into the clinical section, listen for the community engagement part, because that's where it may fall. Our original purpose of the Mailman Center was to provide multidisciplinary training to address the workforce needs of individuals with mental retardation, which I've said now we call intellectual and developmental disabilities. And what we've seen is an incredible trajectory of growth. From individual training to multidisciplinary training, interdisciplinary to community, to interprofessional and leadership and web-based in the training area, to services primarily for children with genetic conditions, to children that were premature and came out of our NICU, to an extensive program in children with chronic illness, with cancer, sickle cell disease, HIV, Zika, as we have emerged with these various things. Newborn screening, when we started, Dr. Howell, there are 3 or 4 conditions that were screened. I think we got up to 7, then we got up to 22, and I don't even want to count because they probably added 3 today, as we have advanced our ability to identify conditions of the newborn that we can provide treatment to. We've gotten involved in infectious disease, and our Zika initiatives were here in Miami as an epicenter, but also in the U.S. Virgin Islands and in the Dominican Republic. And then much of the work we do now is center and community-based, and you'll hear about those as we go through. Our research at the beginning was very center-based and developmental. It emerged into follow-up of babies coming out of the hospital setting to clinical trials, behavioral clinical trials, drug clinical trials, and others, and then to get into service delivery prevention and service delivery research and prevention. And now we're evolving very big into the area of community-based research, and we'll share more about that. And with a paper we published last year that we'll talk about, really thinking about how the work we do with children, their families, and their communities has an impact on the communities that they live in. And our community engagement, we used to be center-based. Today, more than half of the work we do is outside the walls of this building and off this campus. We've been very involved in hospital and acute care. I will say that when I was hired, Dr. Cleveland called me to his office as chair of pediatrics, and he said, "I'm hiring you because I want you to break down the barrier between the developmental world and the child health world," because we had 2 sections of the department at the time. I think as a center and as a department and as child health across this institution, we've done that as well as anyone. And you will see community-based services, collaborative work to build community capacity, and we'll hear about global impact that we've been able to do. I've included a couple of newspaper articles on the side. The top one talks about how the pediatricians and educators in Miami-Dade County, a year after Mailman Center opened, were complaining that we weren't serving enough children and it took too long to get an evaluation. That sounds a little familiar. There was some money that was put in. They were able to increase that from about $1,500 to $2,500. Everybody was happy for a while. Today, we serve more than 15,000 children a year, far more than 15,000. And guess what? The community still complains we don't serve enough and it takes too long to get an evaluation. So a big part of what we'll be talking about and what next is how do we do that when just doing more of what we do isn't really working. What's next is the title of this whole presentation, and you're going to hear what we've done, and then we'll follow up at the end with what's next. Because really, it's all about the children.